Today's story is going to be heartbroken. His name, at least the one he used when it suited him, was Chase Carter. It sounded clean and fast, like a car that never stalled, like a promise that never missed a green light. He drove nights in a silver sedan with a pine-scented air freshener and a charm that opened more doors than any key. He called it rideshare work, but most nights he treated the job like a fishing line. He'd circle downtown, skim the music, and wait for someone to step into the soft pool of his voice. Her name was Isabella Monroe, though everyone called her Izzy. Old house with white columns, a mother who loved fresh hydrangeas, a father who collected quiet watches, and even quieter opinions. Money didn't make Izzy loud, it made her careful. She spoke in a way that made people lean in. She wore a gold chain with a tiny star she never took off. When she laughed, it sounded like someone had finally turned on the light. They met on a rainy Thursday in March when the apps were surging and the streets smelled like wet metal. Izzy had stayed late at the gallery to fix a label under a painting that wouldn't stop tilting. She'd been squinting at the text when her best friend, Talia, texted, "Call the car. Don't walk." A driver named Chase pulled up, headlights blinking against the glass. She slid into the back seat and said, "Sorry about the rain." He said, "I like rain. It makes everyone honest." He glanced at her in the rearview. Dark hair tucked behind one ear, hands around her tote like it held something important. He asked if the music was okay. She said yes, then caught the song. Old soul, soft guitar, and asked what it was. He said, "It's a playlist I made for people who look like they read." She smiled and rolled her eyes because flattery was cheap, but the song wasn't. He drove without hurrying, hit the green lights like a trick he would never admit was luck, and asked questions that never felt like questions. By the time he stopped in front of the Monroe house with the white columns, he knew her favorite breakfast, that her mother thought the hydrangeas should be a different blue, that Izzy missed the way her grandmother folded napkins like small boats. He also knew how to make himself unforgettable. When she reached for the door, he said, "Hey, if you ever need a late pickup from the gallery, text me. It's safer than waiting on the curb." He slid a card across the seat. The number was real. The name was real enough. The rest of him was practice. The first time Izzy used the number, it was for a simple ride home after a long opening where everyone said beautiful 500 times and meant 50. He didn't charge her. He said, "Consider it a favor to the arts." The second time, he brought coffee and didn't charge her again. He shrugged when she protested. "I make it at home. It costs $1.50 in 5 minutes. Let me give you something cheap that feels expensive." People like to say you can tell the difference between kindness and strategy. You can't, not when the timing is perfect. Chase had perfect timing. He asked about the gallery without sounding like he wanted tickets. He remembered the names of the artists she cared about. He wrapped a scarf around her shoulders while they waited outside a closed bakery because he said the cold could sit in your bones if you let it. He was attentive in ways that made his attention feel like proof. He started to tell stories the way a person builds a bonfire: small sticks, thin smoke, a soft glow you step closer to without noticing your socks or picking up ash. He said he'd dropped out of business school to take care of his mother when she got sick. He said he wanted to open a small detailing shop because he'd always loved making old things look new. He said working nights was just a season. He said a lot of things with a confidence that made Izzy want to hand him a yes. Talia, who had been Izzy's friend since the 5th grade, did not hand him anything. She watched. She had a math teacher's face in a teenager's body, even now that they were both in their 20s. She had a way of keeping score without telling you the rules until the end. After the third time Chase swung by the gallery, Talia leaned on the back counter and said, "I don't like men who are good at making time bend." Izzy laughed. You think he's a magician. I think he's practiced. There's a difference. Practice, Chase knew, was the whole point. He had learned a dozen ways to look concerned without overreaching. He was never greedy. He never asked for too much, not at first. He looked like the kind of man who would hold your umbrella and remember your coffee order and know when to leave. He looked like a promise you could fold into a pocket. The first lie was small enough to step over. It came on a Tuesday when his car was in the shop. He sent a text. I hate to ask. Could you spot me for the towel? I'll pay you back Friday. Izzy sent the money without thinking about it. It wasn't the amount. It was the way he made the ask sound like a rehearsal for being reliable. He paid her back 2 days early and brought flowers that smelled like lemons. Under the yellow petals, the hook glinted in the sun. They started dating the way some people start habits, by calling it something else. He came to the gallery openings and learned the names of the regulars. He remembered to bring her granola bar when she forgot to eat. He washed her windshield while she was inside looking at a new sculpture. He called his mother on speaker, cheerful and dutiful, and let Izzy say hello. The voice on the other end sounded tired and kind. Tell the nice girl to break your bad habits, the woman said, laughing, and Izzy couldn't shake how good it felt to be included in someone else's family joke. Chase was not poor exactly. He was unstable. He moved from a room in a shared house to an apartment above a shuttered tailor. He wore shirts that were always clean, even when you couldn't say the same about his conscience. He wanted to be seen as trying. Trying is the kind of verb that makes nice people weaker than they mean to be. Izzy was nice and good. They are not the same, but the Venn diagram can be dangerous. A month in, the second lie arrived dressed as confession. He said he'd made mistakes when he was younger, got mixed up with friends who thought rules were suggestions. Nothing big, nothing violent, just dumb decisions. He said this with his shoulders rounded, his eyes soft, like a man who wanted to be measured by the distance he had supposedly traveled from his past. She believed him because believing makes the world softer around the edges. It also makes the ground give way in surprising places. He met the Monroes in April under the maple in the front yard. Mrs. Monroe set out iced tea that glowed like gold in the heat and asked polite questions about work and school. Mr. Monroe asked fewer questions with more weight. Chase handled both like a man who had been reading this script in the mirror for years. He complimented the hedges and the watch and the iced tea. He said he liked hydrangeas and didn't make it sound like a line. He was, to their eyes, an earnest man working hard with what he had. After they left, Mrs. Monroe stood at the sink, wiped a water ring no one could see, and said, "He's charming." Mr. Monroe watched the yard like it owed him a truth and said, "The right kind of handsome is a tool." Izzy took her plate to the counter and kissed her mother's hair and told her father he was suspicious of anything that smiled at him. He said, "That is why I can still afford to be suspicious." The relationship unfurled the way bad flags do, looking nice from a distance, fluttering hard in a wind you should have monitored. Chase started spending more nights at Izzy's apartment. He fixed the wobbly kitchen table and left his toothbrush like flag number 1. He cooked eggs badly and left the dishes to soak like flag number 2. He borrowed her car once for a job interview he swore he couldn't miss. He returned it with gas and 2 new micro scratches and a long speech about how success was a patient man's game. He wasn't violent. He wasn't even loud. He chipped at edges and waited for the shape to change. When Izzy missed a call, he texted 3 question marks and then sent a song and then sent nothing. When she went out with Talia, he wrote, "Have fun," and then added, "Send me a pic so I know you're safe," which sounds like care and lies close to control. When she posted a photo of a painting she loved, he replied, "Your eye is better than the curator's," which is a compliment if you don't also work for the curator. Izzy started to edit herself before anyone else asked her to. She cried once at the sink, long and quiet, while Chase napped on the couch with his phone on his chest like a new pet. She didn't know why it had knocked her down like that. The day had been fine. Work, errands, a late sandwich eaten standing up. She felt the shapeless ache of a person who wanted something consistent and kept getting improvisation. That night, when he woke and saw her face, he said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I don't know." He said, "You know you can tell me anything." She said, "I know," and still didn't, because the truth she had was muddy and heavy, and no one likes to bring that into a clean room. Talia kept her counsel until she couldn't. She found the right moment the way she always did, on a walk when the air was sharp and the city felt like it had done its hair for them. "He's nice until he needs something," she said. That's not uncommon. But with him, it feels like the needing is the whole point. Izzy didn't defend him. She defended her hope. "I think he wants to be better," she said, and Talia nodded like a doctor hearing a patient describe a symptom and knowing the name. Wanting is cheap. Choosing costs something. Spring spun into a hot summer. Chase changed jobs without actually changing much. He talked about investments, about a friend with a startup, about getting in early. He needed a bridge loan, just a small thing, while the deal cleared. He hated asking. He asked. Izzy said, "Let me think," and then thought about it until the thinking itself became a kind of answer. She didn't send the money. He sulked without admitting he was sulking. He said, "It's okay, I'll figure it out," in a tone that scattered guilt in tiny pieces around the room. She picked it up because she was good at cleaning. 2 days later, Talia texted her a screenshot from a private women's group. It was a post from a woman named Harper. "Anyone know a rideshare driver named Chase Carter? Said his mom was sick, borrowed money, blocked me." The comments were a crowd around a siren. A few women answered, "Yes, yes, yes." The story had different coats and the same bones. A phone call at midnight. A confession that wasn't. A promise to pay. A smile that took what it wanted and left with an apology gift card. It was a pattern, not a person. Izzy felt the floor tilt under her feet. She knew better than to trust a threat of strangers. But sometimes the collective testimony feels more honest than any one face across a table. She didn't answer Talia. She realized her hands were shaking. She sat down and put her palms flat on her knees and tried to breathe like a person who trusted her own lungs. She asked him that night. She didn't attack. She arranged the facts the way a curator arranges a room so the eye can tell the truth. He glanced at her phone, at the screenshots, at the names that weren't hers, and he did what practiced men do when cornered. He broke into smaller, safer pieces. He said, "It wasn't like that." He said, "Those were different times." He said, "They're exaggerating." He said, "You know me." He said, "Don't I get credit for what I've done right?" He didn't say, "I'm sorry," not at first. When he did, the words were careful. A tool rolled out at the right moment. "I'm sorry you had to see that." You don't apologize for a mirror. You apologize for the mess reflected in it. Izzy didn't say this. She watched him like he was a house she had lived in for a year, and only now noticed the crack in the foundation. Her chest shook. She pressed her hands together to keep from dropping her own soft heart on the floor. He took a step toward her. She took a half step back. He stopped, as if the half-inch carried an answer he couldn't talk around. People think heartbreak is loud. Sometimes it is quieter than a library. Izzy moved through the next days like she was underwater, gathering and naming. She mapped what she knew. The stories online. The small lies she had labeled jokes. The way his face shifted when he wanted something. The hollow feeling after he left her apartment, like someone had turned down the volume on her own life. She made tea and forgot to drink it. She stood in the shower until the mirror fogged and then cleared and then fogged again. She watched the star on her chain shiver above her collarbone and wondered how much of her was still hers. Mrs. Monroe noticed because mothers notice. She didn't say, "I told you so," because she hadn't. She didn't say, "Leave him," because that wasn't how Izzy worked. She said, "Come peel apples with me." They sat at the table and made a pile of skins that looked like red ribbons and said almost nothing. When they were done, Mrs. Monroe slid the bowl across the table and said, "You don't owe anyone the chance to keep hurting you just because you see the good they might be someday." Izzy nodded as if the sentence had been waiting on the counter for her to show up and claim it. Chase tried the bouquet method. He tried the sorry in text and the sorry in person, and the sorry pressed to her wrist like a kiss. He tried the future tense. "We'll do better, I'll be better, this won't happen again," as if the grammar could change the past. Izzy listened. She didn't cave. A week later, she told him to take his things. His toothbrush, his cologne, the sweatshirt he left for mornings that never started on time. He didn't yell. He got quiet and said, "You'll regret this." She said, "Maybe, but not today." She cried at night until the corners of her eyes felt bruised. She cried in the shower in the car, once in the aisle with the laundry detergent when a song from his playlist came on the store speakers, and the floor seemed to lift an inch. She cried like a person who'd been brave for too long. Talia took her phone for a day and put it in a drawer and said, "We will be accepting no late-night messaging from men you should have thought earlier." They watched movies where women didn't die from sadness and ate cereal out of mugs. Talia stayed on the couch until Izzy fell asleep and then sank into the cushions like a guard dog with glitter nails. Chase didn't leave town. Men like him don't need to leave. There's always another street with another woman who thinks her kindness will be the exceptional case. He sent a message every few days. "You around?" He sent a photo of a sunset out his car window, like proof that the world could still be soft with him in it. He sent a voice note in which he almost cried and then didn't. Izzy didn't answer. She wrote long notes in her phone to herself instead. "I will survive the hour from 2 to 3. I will drink water even when my stomach feels like a fist. I will not theory-craft a man into existence to avoid admitting the one in front of me was not what I needed." Summer broke open somewhere above the river. Izzy stood on the pedestrian bridge at dusk and watched the water drag light under and keep going. She felt both small and held. She started running again, not for speed, but to be reminded that her body could carry her farther than her thoughts sometimes allowed. She ate peaches over the sink. She went to a small church with Talia and sat in the back and didn't sing and felt better anyway. She met with a therapist named Janine who had a velvet chair and a habit of asking, "What if the story you're telling about yourself isn't true anymore?" Izzy started making space for a version of herself who wasn't a girl who cried quietly in the kitchen while a man taught his phone to breathe on the couch. The women from the thread found their way to her. Harper invited a few of them to coffee, and there they were. Nora with the chipped pink nail polish, Shay with a cautious laugh, Amina in a blue scarf that looked like a clear sky. They told their versions with shame like a jacket they forgot to take off at the door. Izzy told hers with hands that finally stopped shaking. They didn't build a bonfire. They built a table. They made bliss. They sent each other reminders. You are not an ATM. You are not a fountain. You are a person. They joked about printing t-shirts. They didn't print t-shirts. They kept the jokes because sometimes jokes are a rope over a dark pool. Chase showed up once, months later, outside the gallery as the team locked up. He stood under the awning like a man waiting for rain to choose sides. He said, "Hey," like they were still in the middle of a conversation. Izzy looked at him and saw him through all the versions she had learned to hold. He was handsome in the way a promise is handsome right before you remember to ask for a receipt. He started the speech he tried in his head while he drove circles. I've been thinking, I've been working on myself, I've cut off all the noise, I'm. She held up a hand, just a small stop sign. Chase, he stopped. She said, I don't need your future tense. He blinked, regrouped, angled his mouth into true sadness. I miss you, she nodded. I miss who I thought you were. Not the same thing. He tried again because men like him are taught the world is a revolving door that always brings them back inside if they keep walking. She let the quiet do its work. Behind her, Talia turned the last key and gave Izzy a look that said, I'm here. Izzy said, I wish you well, and I wish you away from me. She stepped back into the gallery light. He stood there like a man who had lost something he thought should have stayed lost. Eventually he left. The street swallowed the sound of his shoes. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some mornings the bed was a ship she didn't want to leave. Some afternoons she realized she hadn't thought about him for 3 hours and felt guilty in a way that made no sense. She told Janine, I hate that he's still in the room when I'm alone. Janine said, then let's give him a new job in your head. Make him a museum plaque. You can glance if you want, but he doesn't move or talk. Izzy tried it. It helped. She made him small inside a frame. She kept walking. She started teaching a Saturday morning class for kids at the gallery, color and shape, and how to say I like this without needing anyone to agree. She loved the way 5-year-olds stood in front of a huge painting and said, that looks like a sandwich. She loved the seriousness with which a little boy named Ellie described a crooked line as a good mistake. She took their words home and kept them in a notebook with a lemon on the cover. She let her life be full of small, clear nouns: coffee, paint, song, sleep. The Monroes exhaled in tiny sips. Mr. Monroe admitted he had Googled Chase early and found nothing that felt like solid ground, but kept quiet to see how the story would go. Mrs. Monroe confessed she prayed for Chase to move to Ohio. Izzy laughed so hard she had to put her head on the table. They started inviting neighbors over on Sundays the way they had when Izzy was little, passing bowls of potatoes and stories back and forth until the house felt like a body that had learned to breathe deep again. Autumn found her. She bought a used bike and learned the exact places the road buckled. She found a bookstore that sold coffee for $1 if you brought your own mug. She took terrible pictures of sunsets and didn't post them. She wrote letters to herself with sentences she needed to read in her own handwriting. You are not stupid. You are someone who loved while someone practiced taking. Those are different roles. She kept the letters in a shoebox in the closet, like trophies that didn't need glass. Chase kept driving. He changed the story when he needed to. New friends, new streets, the same engine. He wasn't a villain. Villains are purposeful. He was hollow in a way that makes noise when you knock. He met a woman who reminded him of Izzy and tried to play the same songs. It didn't land the same way. Maybe she had already heard the playlist. Maybe he was getting older. Maybe the city was finally learning his routes. He texted Izzy in December. Holiday truce. Coffee, she didn't reply. The message sat there like a moth that never found a lamp. On New Year's Eve, Izzy stayed at the gallery late to finish an inventory nobody else wanted to touch. She put on music and worked in a rhythm that made sense to her bones. At midnight, she stepped outside and the city sounded like 100 tiny parades. She held her phone, thought of calling Talia to say I love you in the voice they used once a year, then turned the phone off and let the noise belong to the street. She made a promise to herself that didn't need witnesses, to keep showing up for her own life, even when it felt like a long hallway with bad lighting. The next spring, a man named Daniel stopped in during a rainstorm and stood too long in front of a painting with 5 blue rectangles that looked like windows if you squinted. He was a high school English teacher with ink on his fingers and a way of saying hello that didn't trip over anything. He asked real questions. He listened to the answers. He didn't try to make the room about him. He came back a week later with his students and whispered to Izzy, "If they roll their eyes, it means they're thinking." She laughed and said, "If they sigh, it means they're processing." They stood near the Meyer piece with the gold leaf that glowed like a secret and shared a smile that didn't want anything more than to be a smile. They started with coffee and didn't pretend it was anything else. They left when the coffee was gone. They did it again a week later. Daniel never commented on the gallery's Instagram, even though he followed it. He never offered to help unless she asked. When she talked about the kids in her Saturday class, he asked what colors they loved and then remembered the answer. When she mentioned her grandmother's napkin boats, he folded one from his receipt and set it on the table without making a show of it. He did not fix anything about her. He did not ask her to fix anything about him. He showed up like a person who had learned to arrive on time to the life he had. On a night in May when the air tasted like rain promised and delivered, Izzy told Daniel the outline of the Chase story. Not the ugliness in high definition, just the shape. Daniel listened. He didn't tilt the story toward how he would have behaved. He didn't auction his empathy. When she finished, he said, "Thank you for trusting me." Then after a beat, he asked, "Do you want me to be a witness or a solution when you tell me things like this?" She felt the yes rise in her with a gentleness that startled her. "A witness," she said. He nodded. "I can do that." They didn't rush. They didn't try to wrap a ribbon around anything that still needed a seam ripper. They went to a free concert in the park where the sound was bad and the people were perfect. They sat on the steps of the library and watched a couple argue without cruelty. They cooked a simple dinner in her kitchen and laughed when the pasta clung to the pot like it was afraid of the world. He admired the little star on her chain without asking for its story. She told him anyway, because telling is a kind of choosing. One afternoon, months later, she saw Chase through the coffee shop window. He was at a corner table, head bowed over his phone, the same pine-scented air still clinging to him like a habit he couldn't shake. For one sharp second, her heart did the old trick, breath snag, a backward step inside her chest. Then it steadied. He looked up and their eyes met. He raised his hand, a question. She offered him a nod, an answer. That was all. He looked tired in the way men look when the playlist stops working. She walked on. The bell over the coffee shop door didn't ring. The world didn't tilt. The sky held. She went home and cut a lemon and put the slices in water like her grandmother used to do on days when the house felt heavy. She stood at the sink and watched the afternoon light find the gold rim of the glass. She thought about all the ways a person can learn to leave a room without leaving themselves. She touched the star at her throat and felt, not broken, but mended where it mattered. The seam shows, she thought. Good, it's honest. When Daniel came over that evening, he didn't arrive with a question about where she'd been or who she'd seen. He brought a book she'd once said she loved, but had never owned, and set it on the counter with the gentle pride of a man who had remembered. He made dinner while she told him about a kid in her class who had declared that yellow must be louder than blue. He burned the onions once and then didn't. After they ate, they stood by the open window and listened to the city move through its evening. He took her hand in a way that asked and answered at the same time. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they watched the last light lift off the buildings. People will ask for a lesson. They always do with heartbreak. As if Cain should pay tuition by the time the credits roll. There isn't one tidy sentence. There is, instead, the long practice of learning to tell the difference between hunger and habit, between being needed and being used, between men who love the idea of you and men who learn your actual edges and stay. There is the work of building a life that fits even when no one is clapping. There is the gift of friends who keep your phone in a drawer and sit on your couch until the storm leaves the room. There is the quiet mercy of your own breath at 2 in the afternoon when you realize you haven't thought about him since breakfast and the world didn't ask you to apologize for it. In time, people stopped saying Chase's name. He didn't become a villain in Izzy's story. He became a plaque in a hallway she didn't visit often, a line on a map she didn't need to follow. She met women who were not like her and women who were and reminded each other, gently, that kindness is a good gift, not a door code. She kept teaching kids who said wild things and meant all of them. She learned to skate badly and laughed when she fell. She learned the exact sound her apartment made when it settled at night and decided she liked it. And when she told the story, when she chose to, it always started the same way. Today's story is going to be heartbroken. It was once. Then it wasn't. Then it was something else, stubborn and true, and stitched with gold. She didn't try to make it prettier than that. She didn't need to. The day had already offered something better than pretty. A room with a window where the light arrives on time. A man who knows how to be a witness. A lemon sliced into water. A star that never left her throat. And a heart that learned not to give itself to anyone who couldn't hear its actual beat. Thanks for watching.